part of what we've been doing at Wateraid is supporting the federal government with the National Action Plan, the WASH National Action Plan, which was came out as a result of the declaration of a state of emergency in water and sanitation by the president himself. And there's a plan by the federal government to revitalize the sector and ensure water, sanitation, and hygiene for everyone, everywhere, by 2030 in Nigeria.
For the first time, we're having sanitation on the map. Wally always says that sanitation and wash is on page 20 and 25 of the newspaper, but the government put it on page 1 yesterday. Can we give a round of applause? So this is fantastic for us, you know. But of course, we can allow it to stay on the first page, or we let it slip back slowly to page 20. And our job as Wateraid and for you as WASH Media members is, how can we keep this on page 1, or at least page 2? How do we get the government and everybody now who is involved to really prioritize WASH? And you're not here working for Wateraid. We're here working for you. The question is, what does WASH Media want to do? Now that we have seen that we have the political will, at least at the federal level, how do we now make sure that we keep the heat on and also make sure that we get the states and the local government to begin to do what they need to do? Because that's where the people live. What do we need to do? That's what we're here to strategize about. What are the challenges that as civil society we face in being able to do that? And how do we also ensure that the people, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's not a government campaign, it's a people campaign. We have to change our behavior. We ultimately have to be the ones to say, you know, to get toilets in our homes, toilets in our public spaces. How do we make sure that we have the right messaging? How do we think about, you know, let's think about how we think as Nigerians. I remember once I was talking to UNICEF, and they said they were doing a campaign in a state, and they were trying to get people to buy, you know, to put toilets. And they had come from the health angle. And nobody was paying attention, because of course, you know, they see that they are not dying. So, you know, they're really not, you know, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 people. And so they really had to go back and say, what is it that is going to, you know, motivate these people to change their behavior? And then they realized that, you know, these are proud people and aspirational. And then they changed the message to say, to look at it as to make toilet building a pride for men. And say, how can you be a man and your wife is going to the bush, you know, to do her thing? What if she gets kidnapped? What if something happens to her? You know, how can you be there and your wife and that did it. That did it. So they were able to tap into the fears and into the aspirations of the people to change that, you know, narrative. And so sometimes it's not always what is obvious. We know that ultimately what we want is to change the health behavior. We know that we want people to have improved life. But that may not necessarily be what will motivate people to change their behavior. So we need to think as CSOs, as journalists, who know the society well. What are those things that we need to do that will really get Nigerians to think about changing or to change their behavior? Sometimes we are forced to think outside the box. You know, sometimes we need to improve the way we think inside the box. And so the question for us is, today, let's interrogate that. Let's look at how collectively we can do this. Like I said, it's with you, WASH Media, leading and we following, and not Wateraid leading and we following. Because now the government, you know, has set the stage, and it is for us who are the citizens to now move forward. But I want us to keep the picture in our mind of who it is that we're really trying to serve. Because it's not about fancy articles in newspapers. It's about that woman who's pregnant. At 2 a.m. in the morning, she has a running stomach, and she has to go out in the bush. Keep that image in your mind. And then 1 hour later, because she has a running stomach, she has to go again in the bush, in the middle of the night. That's why we are here. It is for that for that little child that is dying of diarrhea even as we speak. So if we keep that image in our minds and recognize at the end of the day, we who are supposed to be the giant of Africa are living this kind of life, and we're the ones setting the pace for Africa. What does that mean for us? Let's remember that that's why we're here.
It's also very exciting to see media outlets and civil society organizations so interested and passionate about WASH. I don't know if you know, there is a very weird and peculiar expression in English. It's called teaching my grandmother to soak eggs. Do you know what it means? It means talking to experts about things that they know how to do very well. So that's not what I'm going to do. What Chichi asked me to do, because you're all experts in your own right and you know quite well what you're doing, what I'm going to do is just to share some reflections about how Wateraid, what approaches Wateraid has used in advocacy that has succeeded, and a couple of global examples that could be useful in Nigeria. So if we look at the universal coverage in the world, we're really, really off track. So the level of ambition to cover everybody for universal coverage, and the level where we are, the scale of the ambition and the scale of the challenge, there is a huge gap between them. There is still 1 in 3 people don't have toilets in the world. There is still 1 in 9 people do not have access to clean water close to their home. And if we continue what we're doing now, like project by project, household by household, it will take us to the middle of the next century to have universal coverage in the world. Next century, not 2030. So what needs to be done about it? Wateraid's experience and research have shown that there are 3 preconditions for change. There are 3 things that need to happen to achieve a huge breakthrough. The first one is political will and prioritization. And that's what we see happening in Nigeria today. Yeah, moving up the prioritization. The second one is a well-functioning sector. It's institutions that can deliver services to people. So that's the supply side. And then also empowered citizens, civil society and consumers who demand good services and hold the government to account. So these are the 3 things that need to happen for everyone to get universal coverage. So, and if you look at civil society actors, at people like us as media, we have a critical role to play across all these 3 important preconditions, so that we influence things not by project, not by kind of small town and village, but have a transformational impact at scale. And that's a role of a change agent like ourselves. And so what we need to do is we need to keep our eyes on the big prize. And I think the big prize, if you think about 47 million people having a dignified and healthy life and having a toilet, if you think about the women that you were talking about, Chichi, about resolving the crisis in WASH in Nigeria, that's a huge prize, yeah? That's worth kind of keeping it in the horizon and then thinking what are the stepping stones that will take us there. And we at Wateraid, I use the word influencing rather than advocacy, yeah? Because you can influence in very different ways. And it combines advocacy, it combines lobbying, it combines very, very different approaches to which we can achieve transformational change. At Wateraid, when thinking about how do we achieve this big prize that is in front of us, the universal coverage, nation by nation, globally, we ask ourselves 4 questions. The first question is, what are we influencing? What is it that we're trying to change? Is it a policy? Is it a practice? Is it an attitude? Is it behaviors? And if I look at the ODF campaign that was launched so kind of with such passion, pomp, and ceremony yesterday, it's a combination of everything, isn't it? It's a combination of a sanitation framework. It's a combination of people changing their behaviors. It's a combination of practice. The second question in Wateraid we're asking ourselves is, who are we influencing? In what spaces? Are we influencing globally? Like Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation was a global standard, a global goal that is inspiring everybody and is also holding the governments to account. So are we influencing at global level, regional level, federal level, local level? And are we influencing the government, the businesses to change their practices? Are we influencing? Who are we influencing? So that's the other question. The third one that we are asking ourselves when we do the influencing in Wateraid is how are we doing it? We know the big prize, we know the strategy, what are the tactics? And that's where sort of advocacy kicks in. Are we doing it through behind the corridors lobbying, finding people who can know some other people that are in power? Are we doing it through hearings behind the scenes? Are we doing it through popular mobilization, briefings, letters, advocacy, bringing in all the possible arguments? Economic argument with the Minister of Finance, moral arguments with people. What are the arguments we are using? And the fourth one, like how are we creating new narratives and changing the public discourse about something that has been a taboo or was considered as normal, such as sanitation? And the fourth one is, when are we influencing? Something that you said, Chichi, at one of our meetings is, how do we program for luck? Yeah. So there are sometimes lucky opportune moments, like now in Nigeria. How do we program for luck? And then, so there are opportune moments, and then there is kind of a flatlining moment, periods, where we need to prepare so well to capture those political opportunities when they arrive. Being reactive and proactive, being planned and opportunistic, riding the waves and creating waves. So that's kind of different approaches we can take. The most important thing is for us is work politically to understand what the opportune moments are, how we capture those opportunities, and knowing what makes politicians tick and being ready to capture them. So these are the various approaches that we take in our advocacy and influencing. And I would like to illustrate with some examples, and then ask also my colleague Mariam to give some examples from West Africa, because that's kind of the region that we are in. One of the very striking examples for me was right now, which is happening. A big publication, it's called New National Publication in Malawi, approached Wateraid saying, look, there are more than 150 health facilities in Malawi that do not have WASH. And we have been talking about it for years, but no one was listening. But it got somehow to the people in this publication that it's really critical. And they do sort of marathons and campaigns every year and devote it to some kind of social causes. And so we joined efforts, raised a lot of money, and increased the attention to these 150 health facilities. And one of the most powerful things were that the urbane, the kind of very middle class women, especially politicians' wives, etc., we took them to stay in those maternity wards for 2 days and witness what these women are facing on a daily basis. And they came back very shocked. They came back really touched. And I think that campaign delivered a lot of fundraising, but a lot of also influenced the government to do something about it, because we managed to influence people who are listened to. The other example I was talking about with Chichi and Mariam on the way. Unfortunately, I forgot the name of that very, very glamorous reggae singer in Burkina Faso, who, you know, this kind of much loved, very glamorous, you don't associate those kind of people with toilets, and he became and named himself a toilet ambassador, and initiated and recorded songs and started to campaign with us on sanitation. And that changed a lot of people's attitudes towards the sanitation, which is something taboo, something there, something dirty, and that was a fantastic example. And for a very long time, we have been working with a cohort of journalists. They were doing their own stuff. They were creating loads of interesting human stories from the WASH angles. But they were coming to us just to get more informed about WASH issues, so they don't cover it in a way that is not correct. And so these people influence and inspire others to do that, so like something we are doing in Bauchi. I want to give an example from Ethiopia, where we worked with 20 utilities to change how they work. And there were 900 utilities in the whole country. So they came to us, like what is happening in Bauchi and other states, came back to us and said, so you have worked with 20, how can we change the way we work really well and to make sure that we address the leakages and do the campaigning so that people pay their fees. And what happened is, we started working with an institution, that the Ethiopian Central Technology Institution, to bring in a curriculum of how to transform utilities. And then other utilities started coming and learning from that. So there are many ways of influencing. Media is so critical. It's like changing the discourse, it's changing the narratives. And so I'll stop here for a moment. I would ask to Mariam to give like 2 examples from West Africa. But before I do, I would like to say it's such an encouraging time, such an exciting and inspiring time in Nigeria. And if all of us can think about ourselves as actor, yeah, you know, they say kind of what we do is a drop in the ocean, but if we don't do that drop, the ocean will be dry. So think about what the drops that we bring into Nigeria, what an exciting time it is to influence transformative big change.
We are really working for now, but also for the future. So in terms of how media can really make a difference as a critical actor of the transformation agenda on the water sanitation and hygiene, I will give 2 examples. One is about Burkina Faso, where the sanitation access was 1%. 1%. And then we were working, was working with the Media Journalist Network, because we had a program with them across the region, and Nigeria was one of them. But there was the one in Burkina was quite active, and their question was, after they were part of the platform was meeting, and then these figures were given. They said, what can we do? And then we have a chat with them and said, we need to start really looking at the areas of these big bosses, leaders, be it from the government or from the private sector, from the diaspora, or from the political parties and all of that. But then we said, okay, we found that was a great idea to do that, and we just have stories and a kind of a film on, a video on the state of sanitation in their own villages. And then we put this forward to the Ministry of Water, and he was a bit hesitant, and then he said, okay, so what next? Are you just going to do that for just to shame us? But the idea was, okay, there is a need of investment from the outside world to support Burkina on this. But what are you doing? Because if we look at the people here in this room, we are privileged. We just turn the tap and water flows. And then we have also the toilets. So what are we doing as individuals, in particular individual leaders, because we are in a better situation than the ordinary people, the majority. And he said, yes, he was interested also in that. So we did that, and it was amazing to put story, faces on the, behind the reality, in their own villages, where you have people, old people or pregnant women, etc., that were not having that access, and how they were feeling about it. most of them were saying, we are going to the open because we don't have another alternative. And that collection, they did a report and also the video, and it was shared with the minister. And then it was something that just, make a big shift, And the proposition was, what can you as minister this, or what can you as a wealthy diaspora Burkinabe living in France, or what can you do? It's because it was 5,000 CFA, I don't know how much it is in Naira, to get a proper toilet. And these people, and we said we trigger communities, but then after that, there is issue of getting. We Wateraid, we can bring the trainings and the process managing. In one night, and they combine it with fundraising, in one night in Burkina Faso, which is quite a poor country, they raise 90 million CFA in one night. And the interesting story about it is that the first lady at that time came with a check of 1 million to give, because she was there. And then someone, a Burkinabe, came with 3 million. When she saw that, she said, okay, give me back. I said, for her to give more. But then it's individually, they said, I'm ready to give 500,000 CFA this. Okay, but you do it in our village, but they are not the one targeting who to serve. So we identify who are in most need, and there is a process. So just to say how that Media Journalist Network was able to really make, today, the leader-led total sanitation is quite well known, and now Senegal went to them, to Burkina Faso, to learn from the process. The other example was on the SDGs, In 2014, the Africa Sun conference, just before the approval of the SDGs, was in Dakar. And there was the big water people were really not convinced that we need a water and sanitation goal. But the learning from the MDG showed that we needed that. So the Media Journalist Network used it was a movement, like a movement across the countries where we were, to write about how important it is to get really a standalone goal on water and sanitation. Was really fact, live in different countries. And that was used at the Africa Sun really to go to the ministers, from all parts of the Africa and say, the allies, those we know that will listen to us, to say this is a reality. Are we going to let really this opportunity, to miss this opportunity to get a standalone goal on water and sanitation, or are we just talking about the big water for agriculture, water for, And that was a turning point. We battled up to midnight, but this thing, when we came with that was really, that made them happy. So I think definitely you have the power to make the change happen.
Development agencies don't look into the FCT as they don't look into the FCT as part of the states that actually need interventions. So my organization, we've been gathering some case studies about the issue of sanitation in FCT, and we've realized that there's need for thorough intervention in FCT. I mean, if you're trying to get the government to do something and then you let them know that right under their nose something is a lot of things is going on, and you gather case studies, bring up issues that are happening around them and push it to them. I mean, it goes a long way to drive the change that you want to see. So it's like saying charity begins at home. You're trying to get FCT to work, and then you're trying to bring out issues that are happening around FCT to get the government to do something about it, and then from there expand to other states in Nigeria. So my observation or appeal would be to be for the bigger development agencies, Wateraid and other donors, to also look into sanitation intervention in FCT. Thank you.
In Abuja now, there are some communities that if you get there, you'll be amazed of what is really going on there. And for us as a media for community change, what we basically do is to amplify the voices of people at the grassroots and leverage on partnership to provide sustainable solution to many challenges going on in this community. Because for us, we believe it's not really all about taking pictures, telling stories and every other thing. And at the end of the day, nothing sustainable is being done. It's not really about providing toilets, it's not really about providing water, it's not really about providing proper hygiene for them. Are these things sustainable? So my appeal is just to put these people at the grassroots at the core of every other thing we think about, and like she said as well, the PWDs as well, they need to be put at the center. Thank you.
Just to, I want to react at the Wateraid, something what I have heard from here. And let me start, and I want to be really open. We are sisters and brothers, aren't we? Or militant of WASH. If really the relation, you are looking at Wateraid for funding, we got it wrong. Because we are a very tiny institution when it comes to finance. Okay? So that's one. So really I think the relationship with the major and the CSO should be together to make the change happen. And where we can add value is because we have this relationship with the government which is absolutely open, and with other actors, have to facilitate that connection for you to get the funds. Money is available in Nigeria. Am I right? It's available. And it's not the Wateraid money, it's money it is. So I think it's how we can facilitate that. And I think for a government who is saying, I want to deliver open defecation by 2025, and that was made very clearly to us when we met the engineer Benson, who is the director of water. You know, they want us as a catalyst and as connected to civil society to be supporting on that side. We can say, look, there are in the FCT fantastic initiatives. You have to support it. You see what I mean? That's one. My second point is about how I think we can also ensure that, and I think he said that, from collecting the stories, the photos, the videos, etc., tracking the budget, how we can really close the loop, that our job finish when the service in the right quality, in the right quantity is accessible. I think that's really, for me, to be honest, that's what I'm looking for in this conversation. Funds will be maybe part of it, but it's most importantly, how together can we make Nigeria clean and really stand for being the giant of Africa by all means.
It's an anomaly that what exists in the FCT exists. And the FCT has a lot of money. So why would the CSO be the one going to provide services as opposed to going to advocate for the FCT administration to provide those services? You know, Wateraid, we also had to do full circle. Wateraid was providing services to start with when it became clear that the resources we have is just going to make a dent in the whole country. So we had to think about it and say, why are we using the limited resources we have to go and put services in a country where the government itself isn't doing it? And that's why we have decided to focus more on advocacy, on institutional strengthening, on working with the government. And I don't think that we put enough pressure on our government. If the FCT, if the whole WASH media, are writing the FCT administration and saying, how can this be possible? Why is this community highlighting the issues? If we need to write petitions, if we need to, get other, development partners together, and we're putting pressure on the FCT, that will change. If we look at when El Rufai was minister, and how much work he was able to do with the FCT, and the budget hasn't gone down. And now it's almost like there's no budget for the FCT. We realize that, something is going on. And so I think what our effort is, and that's why we're having this meeting, is to have CSOs and the media really stop thinking in terms of, let's go and do it ourselves. But let's, we elected these people, and they're making a heck of a lot of money, because we are not saying enough. Let's put all our efforts towards the advocacy, towards making them uncomfortable, with the situation.
Last week we were with House Committee Chairman on water and sanitation, right, at the National Assembly. And he said, because the President had declared state of emergency in WASH, the House members representing the 36 states of the Federation, including FCT, that most of their focus in their constituency project is on WASH in 2020 budget. I'm quoting him right. Are we together? And when I had this meeting is coming up, I wanted us to, the media, to engage these people. I know I have, when I look up to my social media, I saw something like West African reporters. They will tell you out of the social states have social allocation for education and people are still sitting on ground. So I want to see media directing their attention to issues of our constituency project. In FCT, the FCT Senator Philip Aduda did few things last year on WASH, even though they are not sustainable. What I'm saying is, if the civil societies are now looking at, okay, there's a budget for WASH as a constituency project, let's start even from there. I'm just mentioning one area. The FCT administration has their own, the Abuja Environmental Protection Board have their own, the FCT, FCT Water Board has their budget. Can we look at each of these budgets? So many of us sitting down here doesn't even know what the budget is talking about in WASH in 2019. Can we bring it out, look at this budget, and know how much is budgeted for each of these activities? For those of us who are in FCT here, can do a follow-up. Those that are also in state, that means there's need for capacity strengthening at the state level so that they can follow this constituency project. The beauty about it is that it has location, the location of the project is in the budget. So if they said they are going to dig one in Gwarimpa in 2020, and you get to Gwarimpa, you don't see anyone as media people, you start shouting that there was 20 million naira made for project in Gwarimpa, water project, and it's not being implemented. I think that may be a way for us to go. But on the Wateraid side and the other civil society organization, we need more capacity. A few weeks ago, last week, before this, the declaration of the campaign launched yesterday, we had opportunity of collaborating with task groups in sanitation in FCT here, right, STGS. And we use a platform. I know Wateraid is also very conversant with M-Water to carry out a small rapid assessment in the situation of sanitation in public schools, public institutions within the city, especially market and all that. And the idea was for us to look at the gaps. What are the gaps? Where did government need to come in? Where did the private sector need to come in? The private sector is getting organized. How will they invest money if they have resources? So there is a lot to do in this area, but I'm urging Wateraid also need to step up in terms of capacity building, strengthening capacity so that people will know. I know a friend of mine also spoke on the issue of budget analysis. Budget tracking should be included in your training if that needs to be. If the training will happen, let's include budget tracking. Tracking of it is very, very key for us. Thank you so much.